Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's Larry Lursey. Welcome back to the channel. In today's episode, we're going to do another vacation photo rescue. This time we're going to take this image, which isn't a great image, not a terrible image, but just kind of boring, and try and give it a little more impact, make it a little more exciting, see what we can do using Luminar NEO. So that's the plan for today. So without any further ado, let's roll the intro. All right, so here is the image we're going to work with today. This is a tree that I saw in Lisbon outside of this monastery, and I thought it was just very interesting textures up against that wall. I liked kind of the different colors moving through here with the blue and the warm and the green. So I think this would be a fun one to work with. In my mind, I'm thinking maybe I move away from photorealistic and kind of really heavily filter it and see what we come up with. So that's kind of what I'm thinking on this, but we're just going to have to experiment and see what works. So as usual, we're going to start by making a copy, calling this Neo. Let's jump into the software. Okay, and again, we could always jump up here to some of these presets and probably get a nice enhancement of this, but as I mentioned before, I'm going to try to take it a little more extreme. This may or may not work out, so we'll see. But let's go into here to edit, and you'll see over here, these are all my different tools. Yours might look different than this. I've moved some up to favorites. You may not have favorites or extensions and things like that, but you should have most of these tools over here to the right. They just might be in a slightly different order. I'm going to start with develop right off the bat, and just see, I don't think we need a whole lot of exposure. I'm going to open it up just a tiny bit since we're going to be doing a lot to it. I want to have a little bit of room to work before it starts blocking up on me. We got that. Now I'm going to look at what direction I want to go. Again, I'm trying to add a lot of contrast and kind of really push it in a more artistic route versus photorealistic. And so I'm going to probably overdo some things and try not to go too far, but let's jump into enhance, because next thing I would probably do is work on the sky, and we don't really have any sky here, so I'm just going to jump right in to start tweaking things. So we get the accent, and let's start moving it across. Just go all the way, see what it's doing here. It's bringing out that blue nicely. That kind of does a good job of bringing out the colors. I hate going all the way across though, so I'm going to pull that back to about 57. I think that does a nice job of bringing that color out in the wall. So there's the before and the after. Okay, happy with that. We can play around with the structure. I don't know that we're going to need a lot of structure. Let's put it at about 11, and see, we could go that way and make it more painterly, which would be kind of interesting, but I think I want to go this direction and make it a little more detailed. So I've got the boost up to about 13, 14. That's at about 29. Okay, so we're starting to make some progress here. If we just look right off the bat from there to there, it's definitely got a little more pop to it. So let's jump into the dramatic and start bringing this up. And remember, we want to have this open because I generally want to bring up the saturation as I bring up the dramatic filter, because as we come across, it's total black and white, which kind of looks interesting on this one, but I don't want to do that on this one. Let's pull it back. Let's bring some saturation back into it. Let's look at the before. Maybe a little too much. Let's bring that back to about 24, 25. Okay, I think that works. So now it's a question of where do we want to go next? Let's jump into details. I want to add a little more detail to this. So I'm going to go through and I'm just going to do pretty much 10 or 11 across the board. Bring that sharpness up to about 16 and just see what that does. Can't see too much. Let's bring these all up to about 15. So now everything's right around 15 or 16. It's a little more than I want down here, so I'm going to bring back some of the small detail down to about 8 or 9. So I want this here in the wall, this texture to come through, but I don't need it everywhere else. So let's bring this sharpen down to about 9, 8 or 9. There we go. And one of the things we're going to try to do as we go through here is exactly this, where you look at the before and the after, and it looks like a very minimal change. If we look here at our edits, we've done these 5 filters so far, and they've all been very minor changes, but when you start looking at the before and after like that, you can already see it's starting to have a really big impact. Okay, so what I'm going to try experimenting with now is putting a little texture on top of this. So I'm going to come over here to layers, hit this little plus. So we're putting a layer on top. I'm just going to grab a kind of a black and white texture here. Let me bring the opacity up. It's just kind of a black and white canvas. You can see some texture, a little bit of maybe some brush strokes through it. And you can find these textures all over the place. There's tons of websites that either sell them or give them away. So certainly I think something you want to do is try and build your library of textures. But this is what we're going to start with here. I'm going to hit fill here to fill up this whole piece. Then what we want to do is go in here and start playing with these blending modes. And I'm probably looking at either overlay or soft light, and I just know that from experience that it generally gives it a cool look. See, hard light really brings out the texture too much. Let's try this soft light. Okay, and then what we can do is we can see the before, bring that opacity down for the before, all the way up for the after. It's not doing as much. Let's go back and try overlay. There's the before. There's the before. There's the after. So you can see it's giving it a little bit of extra kind of grunge through there, which I think works nicely. So I'm happy with that. And you'll see over here that now we've got these 2 different layers working, the texture on top and the other image we're working on down below. Okay, before we move on, we're going to want to make sure we move back here to the original file, because we don't want to be working on that texture file. We want to continue working on what we've got here. So I'm going to go over here and try out the mystical. Now, again, we've done a lot of sharpening through here and kind of given this a much more crispy type of look. And the mystical is going to go the other way, but sometimes it's nice once you've gone in and really kind of made something sharp and contrasty to go back in and throw this at it and see what it does. And it may fight against it and not work right, or sometimes it looks really interesting, kind of takes the edge off. And let's just see what this, so there's the before, there's the after. I'm not sure. I like having that texture in the wall, but this one does kind of make the tree stand out a little bit more, so I might go ahead and go this route and just push this amount up. I've got it at about 50. So it's really seems to me like it's doing a lot more of an effect on the wall. It is taking some detail out of the tree, but I think we had plenty to spare. And so I kind of like how that is. I think kind of as you're playing with this type thing, you look at it and you decide, do I like the before image or the after image better? And in this case, I like the after image better. So I'm going to stick with it. Again, you kind of may be heading one direction with this thing and then end up going a whole different direction. Let's jump down to super contrast. I'm going to put each of these at about 20. We're going to go through, we're just looking at the highlights, and we're going to look what happens going different directions. I think I like it more out this way. It brings back a tiny bit of that texture. Midtones, not doing a whole lot. I tend to like the darker a tiny bit better. The shadow's really affecting that tree, and I think I like it a bit on the darker side. So let's see our before and after. I do like that better. Okay, at this point, I think we want to come here and switch to mood and play around with some of these lookup tables, because a lot of times these will give us a very interesting overall look. And I'm going to come here to the creative and look at some of these and see which direction this tends to throw. And I really like that warm color punch. think that Manhattan works nicely. I kind of like this color punch hot. Let's look at the before and the after. Here's the before. Kind of a judgment call, but I like that. I think that looks cool, that direction. So I'm pretty happy with what we have here. We could go in and tweak a few other things. We could go into the color, for example. Play with the saturation a touch. I'm going to bring up the vibrance a little bit. And then we could really come in through here. For example, I think these greens could probably come down a touch. They're just almost neon looking. So I'm going to pull down these greens a little bit, see what the cyan does as well. If that works, you can see how this green is losing some intensity. Like this was it before. That's it now. So it's still green, but it's not so competing with the rest of the scene. So I think that helps. This is also, you could come through here and you could shift the whole thing if you wanted to, all crazy different directions, but I don't think we need to really mess with that. Yep. Just gonna leave that like that. All right, we're definitely making some progress now. I'm wondering as I'm looking at it, what some film grain would do if we throw at this, and it may or may not be a good idea, but let's throw a little bit on it. We go with a little bit bigger grain. So I'm at about 30 and 30. This is up to about 60 or so. Let's take a second. Really just kind of seeing it back through there. So I'm not crazy about it. I'm going to drop this down to 20, which is really hard to see much of anything with that. So I'm not sure that's even doing anything. But I'm pretty happy with that. We can take one more check here where we just hit the little eyeball here, and there was our before and there's our after. So definitely a very harsh difference between the two. I might go back in here to enhance and just give it a little more enhance of this accent. And then I'm probably going to pull it back when I get back into Photoshop. Let's do a tiny bit more. You can see before, after. I'm pretty happy with that. Let's go ahead and save the preset just so we have it. And I don't know. Let's just call it Artistic Tree. These titles are always so random. Okay, I think that will work. Let's hit apply and take a look at it in Photoshop. All right, so we've got it sitting here. We're going to, of course, change this to, what is it, Artistic Tree. So there's the before, there's the after. Pretty happy with that. So what I can do, if I think it's too much of an effect, I can come in here and start bringing this opacity down. Sometimes you can even go super crazy and try changing this blending mode as well. Sometimes that gives it a different look, but I'm going to leave it here and maybe bring down that just a touch. So I got, I don't know, about 83%. And I still think that is a very dramatic difference from that to that. I think that's a pretty good change. I might try when I go through cropping it, playing with some different crops. Might even try compressing it a little bit from the sides and make it a little more tall, skinny type of image. But I think this has got us in the ballpark, and I'm really happy with the overall makeover. And there you go. Pretty happy with those results. I think we ended up with a much more interesting image. And so I'm really happy with the progress on that. If you've got an image that you'd like me to work on in a future episode, send it to vacationphotorescue@gmail.com, and I will try and add that one to the list. But that's all we have for right now. Hope to see you again soon. Take care. Bye-bye.